सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति। A couple of questions. The first question: for a predominantly Rajasic person, how by promoting Sattva Guna in the early hours through study and reflection, how does it influence the action performed during the day at Rajasic time? That's the question. For a predominantly Rajasic person, it is said, do the promote Sattva Guna in the early hours of the morning. The question is how that study and reflection in the morning helps through the action during the daytime. That's the question. What is the connection between the morning study and the actions during the day? Excuse me. When you have promoted your Sattva Guna, the study and reflection helps you to manage your actions throughout the day. In that way, it helps. If that morning study and reflection is not there, the reminder is very less. So you tend to get carried away. You will tend to get influenced by the action itself. You will tend to get involved in the action. You will tend to get carried away by the desires. All this happens if everyday reminder is not done. And this everyday reminder is what is known as the morning study. This is how the morning study helps. It's like if you have exercised in the morning, you will be fit and alert during the day. If you have been lethargic in the morning, the lethargy continues during the day. It is something similar to that. If you have exercised in the morning, if you have exercised your Sattva Guna in the morning, what happens is during that day, it influences your actions. It influences your action in the sense of you not getting involved in the actions. If you don't do this, what happens is you tend to get involved in the actions. In that way, the morning study helps. That's why this morning study is Nitya Karma. You have to do it. You have to do it every day. It's a Nitya Karma. You have to understand it as the Nitya Karma. Just as bathing, brushing, sleeping, eating are all Nitya Karma. This is also a Nitya Karma. When you do this, the whole day you are taken care of. How are you taken care of? You will be able to maintain some objectivity in your actions. Because knowledge serves and reminds you quicker. Otherwise, you tend to forget. No. You study once a week, you study once a month, or you study once a year, what happens? You tend to forget. Now, when you do this every day, the remembrance of it is more. So, the chances of you holding yourself is better. What are the chances of you holding yourself better? Remember, we have said this before. Intellect is available after the action. Intellect is available at the end of the action. Intellect available during the action. Intellect available before the action. more you do this study and reflection, the intellect would be available before the action. That is why we say this is how it will influence your everyday action. Are you able to follow, Bhaskar?
Yes, sir.
Intellect is available after the action. The intellect is no intellect. And the intellect because of that intellect there is no use. Because you will go back and do the same thing again next day. Intellect available after the action and all doesn't help a person that much, because you will get up, you will get you will get angry, you will shout at anger, and you will lose your temper, and then resolve not to get angry. Again, what you will do next morning? You will get angry again. So intellect available after the action is not of much use. So the intellect available at the end of the action, in the middle of the action, before the action. The everyday study and reflection will help you to have this intellect either in the middle of the action or before the action. That's what this objectivity is all about. That's what objectivity is all about. That's what it means that you are able to do it rightly. Are you able to follow? That is how the morning study influences this is how your morning study influences your action performed during the day at Rajasic time. This is the first question. The second question. Is it okay, Bhaskar, the first question?
Yes, sir. Very
Yeah.
clear. Thank you.
Yep. The second question. Vedantin is one who has the ideal of Jiva Brahma Aikya. Okay. We can look at Shastra as Swarga Shastra. A person who studies Vedanta for this purpose is not Vedantin. Correct. His attention is upon a happy, peaceful life, not moksha. It will not automatically drive a person to moksha. Correct. You have to separately work for moksha. Correct. Kindly elaborate on working separately for moksha. What Bhaskar is asking is, the Shastras can be used in two ways. The Shastra can be used in two ways, which is what I loosely called it as Swarga Shastra and Moksha Shastra. Swarga Shastra means a happy, better life now. Modalla, let us lead a happy, better life. Moksha we'll see later. This kind of approach to Shastra is called Swarga Shastra. Swargamna, a better place, a happy life, a life devoid of agitations. Purpose of life is to be happy and peaceful, no sir. People conclude like that. They may also use the same Shastra to get to that end. What happens to them? They will lead a happy, peaceful life. Avladha. I thought it will stop. Then I said, you have to, if you want to moksha, you should move away from the happy, peaceful life and directly work for moksha. It's not that a happy, peaceful person will automatically start aspiring for moksha. It's not sequential. It's not that agitated person will become peaceful first. If it can work that way, most of us will be going behind moksha by now. But then you understand that it's not happening that way.
Sir, we lost you for a moment, sir.
Therefore, I said, you need to separately work for moksha too. You need to separate. You need to separately work for moksha also. Now here the network is like up and down, so there will be some lag. If there is some lag, just point out. I will repeat what I said. So the question is, A happy, peaceful person is not going to automatically aspire for moksha. Allah. It's not that this person will go to moksha directly. You have to work separately for moksha also, I said. Now Bhaskar's question is, elaborate on working separately on moksha. All that we are doing in all these classrooms, Bhaskar is trying that only. That's what we are trying. We are not looking at a happy life. The ideal here is not to have a happy life, peaceful life. That's what we are trying. That is why beyond a point, people get very disinterested and fed up with the sessions also. Because we don't talk about a happy life. We don't talk about what is to be a happy, good life, happy, peaceful life. We don't talk. It is about moksha. So kindly elaborate on working separately for moksha. All that we are doing in all these classes is to work for moksha. The entire knowledge in the way that we explore is towards moksha only. I distinguished that day by saying that don't get carried away by the relative peace and all that you get. You start gaining knowledge, you start understanding. Relatively, there will be a peace. Relatively, you will not be affected. Where others around you are that much affected, comparatively, you will not be that affected. That means it is Swarga. It means you are in a happy state. You are in a peaceful state. But you should not get contented with that. You should say, this is not the purpose. What I am aspiring for, what I want to get to is moksha is what you should work for. Are you able to follow? This is what, so all these classrooms are aimed at that only. Separately, I cannot ask kindly elaborate on working separately for moksha. Cannot be explained separately because all the classes in so many try. Nalamu puspusa creativa, we are coming up with stories. Puspusa, we are trying to say something. All that is to somehow convince at least one person that let us work for moksha. Not be carried away by the relative peace and happiness that we are gaining. Not to get carried away by that. People get carried away by that. I've seen any number of people getting carried away by this relative peace and happiness, and they feel that they are on the right track. They are not on the right track. For you need to work for moksha separately. You need to have moksha as a goal and work. You can't say first I will become peaceful, then I will work for moksha. You can say that. It's not that you can't say. You can say that you can get that peace and relative happiness, relative contentment, relative unaffected state and all that you can get. But that will not, don't assume that automatically it will take you to moksha. Are you able to follow?
Yes, sir.
So that's why every other class I keep segregating these two. I keep separating these two and say, don't get carried away by this, work on this. Don't get carried away by this, work on this. You follow?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Seriya? The third question. When it comes to implementation of Vedanta, would it suffice to just to focus on manana and take care of the microcosmic level, and it would automatically around us to practice it? Why is there an urge to transfer the practice to others, and how to curb that? What he is saying is, what Bhaskar is saying is, let me do my manana reflection and let me do my things rightly. Is that enough for people around me to pick it up and start practicing it, implementing? oneself. If I practice it rightly, will others around me pick it up automatically? அதுதான் he's putting microcosm, macrocosmic level he's putting இல்லையா ஃபேமிலின்னு போட்டா திட்ட போறோமே he's putting microcosm, macrocosm அவ்வளவுதான். இதெல்லாம் it's not that we don't know what the question is. Question is how to make the family follow Vedanta. அவ்வளவுதான் ஒரே question. To put it in a very simple way, அது வந்து he goes around in a very அப்படியே ரொம்ப scholarly microcosm, macrocosm எல்லாம் போட்டு he is confusing so much. Bhaskar.
Yes, sir.
That's a question, no?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Why is there an urge to transfer the practice to others? The urge to transfer this practice to others is everybody, I have said this sometime before, in every human being, there are two things. In every human being, there are these two detrimental things. Everybody wants to be a teacher and everybody wants to be a policeman. In every human being, teacher, in every human being, there is that urge to be the policeman. Which is detrimental, which is not the right thing. Are you able to follow?
Yes, sir.
See, everybody wants to write a book, no? I want to give my experiences. I don't want my experience to go waste. My experience should help others. Your experience is one of frustration and bitterness. What is there to help others in that? It will be even if you are just staying quiet, it will be a good help to others. Why? Because in every human being, these two urges are there. One is to be a teacher. Teacher means guiding another. Second is to police. To police means should not do. The law we need to. Now, both these are satisfied in one role, parent. In the rendu psychological thing gets fulfilled in that one role called parent. Because the moment you become a parent, you start doing these two. What are the two? You start guiding, because you know the moment you become a parent, you start knowing what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad. No, at least in relation to your child, you think you know. Second is you keep policing. I am not saying don't tell the children or don't police. I'm saying, I'm just using this as an example only to convey how there is this urge in everybody. This urge is there in everybody, which is nothing of the ego. That's all. Which is nothing of the ego. The straightaway answer is ego. But then it will not help you to understand. I'm explaining it in this way. It's ego. The two urges is, one is to be a teacher, another is to be a policeman. Yeah. And it is so fulfilling to do these two. Nothing in your ego will find a fulfillment the way in which these two gives you the fulfillment. Therefore, the urge is to transfer the practice. How to curb that? Yadyada charati shreshtaha tattateva itara janaha sayat pramanam kurute lokas tadanu vartate. Verse number 21, chapter 3. What you do is what the others follow, not what you speak. Nobody follows what you speak. Everybody follows what you do. Therefore, it is very important to focus on what you do rather than what you say. You practice it. And you stay quiet. Your practice becomes an inspiration for them to follow. Always remember this. Don't try to be a policeman. Don't try to be a teacher. Think of how to inspire the other. And inspiration means you should be practicing it. Inspiration means you should be practicing it. You should be unaffected. Then only there is an inspiration. Are you able to follow?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, how to curb that? Ask yourself this question. I have to ask myself this question before I talk about sacrifice to others. How much I am sacrificing? How much before telling others to be disciplined, how disciplined am I? It stops there. Those around you, chances are they will pick it up. It's not automatic that they will pick it up. Chances are they will pick it up. If you start to enforcing it, if you try to transfer the practice, even the little bit of practice they are inclined to do also, they will not do. Because the nature of the mind is anything forced is never forceful. You can't force somebody else to practice. Are you able to follow? Why is there an urge to transfer the practice? Because the ego fulfilling thing. What is the ego fulfilling thing? Two things. One is to be a teacher. Another is to be a policeman. I'm just using policeman in the sense of telling what is right, what is right, what is wrong, what one should do, what one shouldn't do. You become the authority on that, no? That is nothing but the nature of the ego. And especially these two factors is what you see in a parent, which suffocates the children. See, in every relationship, you try these two. You start telling the other what is right, what is wrong, what they should do and what they shouldn't do. If you observe, in every relationship, you tell the other what is right, what is wrong, and you tell the other what they should do and what they shouldn't be doing, which doesn't help at all. Are you able to follow? How to curb that? Tell yourself that this knowledge is for you to practice and evolve, not for you to pass it on to others. சரியா பாஸ்கர்?
Yes, clear, sir. Clear.
யாராவது வாட்ஸ்அப் லிங்க் கேட்டா, ஜூம் லிங்க் கேட்டா அமுச்சு கொடுத்துருங்க. Because sir said it should not be practiced, should not be givenன்றதுனால எல்லாருக்கும் எடிட் பண்ணி விட்டுறாதீங்க. இல்லையா? இது கிளரிக்கல் திங். இது பண்ணிட்டு இருக்கோம்.
Okay.
சரியா? Is it okay, Bhaskar?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. Bharat has a question. How will finite objects help us to experience the infinite? It has to be rephrased like, can finite help us to experience the infinite? Can finite help us to experience the infinite? Then we can ask, if yes means, is it how? How? First, can finite experience the infinite? Finite can only get inspired by the infinite. Finite cannot experience the infinite. The finite cannot experience the infinite. Kenopanishad, part 1. Mundakopanishad, mantras. Kaivalya Upanishad, all of them says the finite cannot experience the infinite. I'll explain how it works. The finite has a specific purpose. The finite has a specific purpose for which it is designed. It can only do that. It can't do anything different from that purpose. The finite is designed for a specific purpose, and they can only do that. They can't do anything else. Or trying to make it do something else is meaningless, is futile, is insanity. Example, the eyes are designed to see. The eyes are designed to see color and form. The eyes are designed to see color and form. It cannot hear, it cannot do what the other senses are doing. Like the eyes cannot hear. Each and every finite instrument is designed for a specific purpose, and it can only do that. The mind is designed to feel emotions only. It can't do anything else. It can't do anything different from feeling emotions. The intellect is designed to discriminate, to distinguish. It can't do anything different from that. And all these instruments by themselves, they cannot function. All these instruments are functioning. By themselves, they cannot function. They are enlivened by the consciousness. And that consciousness is infinite, which cannot be comprehended by the finite. The finite trying to comprehend the infinite is the eyes trying to do all the function of the senses. Again, I repeat. The infinite, the finite trying to experience the infinite is like the eyes trying to do all the functions of the senses. It is designed for a specific function, and it can do that function only. It cannot do that which it is not designed for. Experiencing the infinite is not through the finite instruments. This is from one angle. From another angle, experience is of two. The experience is of two. The subject and the object. The subject experiences the object. The subject cannot experience itself. The subject experiences the subject experiences the object. The eyes cannot see itself. The hand that holds everything, it cannot hold itself. So it has any experience has these two, the subject and the object. It is the subject that comprehends the object. In the relative sense, Bharat is the subject experiencing the world of objects and beings. In a slightly higher sense, Bharat himself becomes the object, the consciousness becomes the subject. Again I repeat, at one level, Bharat is the subject experiencing the world of objects and beings. At another level, Bharat himself becomes the object and consciousness becomes the subject. And that consciousness cannot be experienced. That's where the Upanishadic formula, Brahmavit Brahmaiva Bhavati. The only way to experience it is by becoming it. Any experience is of the body, the mind, the intellect. All experiences is of the body, mind and intellect. Of the very many experiences, God is not another. God is not an experience. Are you able to follow, Bharat?
Yes.
Experience, now idan crux, I'm coming to the crux. Experience has a beginning and an end. All experiences has a beginning and an end. The experience of infinite can never have a beginning, can never have an end. In that sense, you cannot call it as an experience. That is why we say God experience is anirvachaniya. It is indescribable. Because technically, experience means experiences are that which has a beginning and an end. Clear? You cannot have an experience which doesn't have a beginning and an end. The experience of Brahman is such that it neither has a beginning nor an end, which is beyond the comprehension of the human being. Supposing if I say God is an experience, after 10 minutes, after half an hour, I start experiencing something else, no? If I start experiencing something else means, then what I call as the previous experience is not God, but of the instrument. So, go from the basics. The basics is this. Experience has a beginning and an end. Experience nale or beginning point irukano or end point irukano. Appada it is an experience. If there is no beginning or an end, you cannot call it as an experience. Therefore, everything has a beginning and an end. Infinite is that which doesn't have a beginning or an end. Therefore, you cannot call it as so the finite can never experience the infinite. That's how you need to, this is how you need to, I'm just giving some indicators for you to reflect more.
Yes. It's definitely
experience na or subject. Yeah. Bharat.
Yeah, that is correct. So, Guruji, the point was that in all the statements which we read, especially in Vedanta treaties, you have to go beyond the body, mind, and intellect, and then you get into the state of Turiya, which is
Yes.
what they are saying. So
Yes.
the question is, all these are finite in nature because it's been born. It has to
Yes.
die.
Yes.
So these are all. So the question was that I cannot comprehend something which
Yes.
is beyond the Indriyani which is given to me as a human being.
Yes.
Because everything for that matter is like what you said as an experience for me, just short-lived. It comes and goes, it comes and goes, it comes and goes.
I missed a little bit in between.
So I said, like you rightly said, the experiences are very short-lived. It's a matter of, it's time-bound. So
Yes,
the question
it's time
is,
bound. Yes.
So that is why I'm saying, I could not understand when Swamiji mentions, how do you get to a state where it is beyond the body, mind, and intellect? I understand that there is a lot of sadhana required. There's a lot of, Shraddha which is required, knowledge which is required. Again, knowledge is again limited because it's given to you
Yes.
and taken. So how do you transcend all this to get to the Turiya stage?
Yes.
It is written very well, but I'm not able to comprehend. So the question came in. That is a question I wanted to ask through this.
Yes.
How can I comprehend something unknown
Yes.
when I know only whatever is around me is known?
Correct.
So that was the basis. So it is a good manana I have to do.
Yes.
But I think your good point is, Guruji.
Yeah. What happens is, Turiya as such is always the state of Turiya or the state of Moksha is always elusive. Elusive in the sense incomprehensible. That is where you used the right word. Shraddha is that which guides, Shraddha is that which will help a person to navigate through this. Shraddha is that which will help a person navigate through this. Because of the very fact that it is incomprehensible, I have no choice but to pursue it only with Shraddha. In that sense, yes, I have to go through. So, in that sense, I need to do whatever they ask me to do. Whether I understand it or not, whether I like it or not, I need to pursue that. All boils down to what? That thirst in you, which is what you cannot describe it to your own self. Mumukshatva is that which you will not be able to describe it to your own self. You will come to a point where you will know this is not it. The world is not it. Okay, if you have said the world is not it, what is that then? That is still a question mark, and you still need to keep pursuing that. With the hope that maybe what the Shastras is saying is correct. But one thing is very clear is the world, you have understood so completely about the world that nothing in the world is interesting you anymore. That is the state of muksha. That is why mumukshatva itself is indescribable to your own self. That is why if you ask yourself what you are doing, you will not know how to explain to yourself. And even if somebody else is asking around you, you will not know what to You will not know what to answer. You will not know what to do. Because mumukshatva way, it is indescribable. Mumukshatva itself is indescribable. But you know that you are having that, you are suffocated by it, and you know that you have to do something to get out of it. Which no language, nobody would be able, which nobody would be able to, which your own instruments will not be able to comprehend. Forget about others. Your own body, mind, intellect will not be able to comprehend what are you searching. Your own body, mind, intellect will not be able to understand what are you looking at, what are you searching for. Continuing that, and when a person reaches this stage of mukshatva, what happens is he has other than Shraddha and the Shastra and the Guru, he has nothing else. மூணு விஷயம் தான் இப்போ வந்துரும். The Shraddha, the Shastra. The Shraddha, the Guru, because it is the Guru that is exploring the Shastras for us. Guru himself is the Shastra. So on the stage only these three matters. What are the three? The Shraddha, the Shastra, the Guru. The Guru, because without him we will not be able to take the help of the Shastra to pursue the goal of mumukshatva. So in the incomprehensible and the not able to comprehend we need not go right up to Brahman. At even mumukshatva itself is indescribable. Your own like the Plato's metaphor, the Plato's cave metaphor. Plato in the Republic writes about the cave where generations were stuck in the cave. Deep inside the cave, their generations were stuck and they are all chained to each other. And the only satisfaction, only thing that keeps them okay is the fire. There is a small fire in the middle. And the shadows play around. So the only entertainment is looking at the shadows playing around. That's all the only entertainment is. Suddenly, one fellow woke up and said, there has to be something to life outside of this cave. He went and asked his father, he went and asked his mother. They said, there is no such thing. He continued but then in him he knew something is there out. But if you ask him what it is, he doesn't know what it is. Yeah. He was taken to the wisest person in the group. The wisest person in the cave said, if there is something, we would have known it already. The very fact that we didn't know it means there is no such thing. So therefore, don't waste your time. Quite a few people in the past try all this and they didn't get anywhere. So don't waste your time getting into all this. But that boy couldn't sleep. Because he knew that there is something. So what happened? One day when everybody is fast asleep, he slipped. He moved out. That is the most wonderful stage. The most beautiful stage, wonderful stage. He left the group. When he left the group, he was into a kind of greater darkness now. Because at least there was the fire, there was a group of people there. Now, at least there was a fire, there was a group of people there to support. Now he is all by Now he's all by himself in the total darkness, not knowing where he is, not knowing where he is going. 99 will rush back to the ground. 99 will rush back to the group. Everybody starts like this. At the first difficulty, 99 will get back. That boy persisted. That boy said, no, I am not going to go back. Every step he took, he was hitting against some corner. He was hitting against some rock. He's scratching himself somewhere. But that boy didn't go back. He kept persisting. He kept going. He kept going. After some time, he suddenly saw something like a small light, diamond, sparkling at a faraway distance. From total darkness, this diamond became that sparkling thing became the direction for him to follow. So what he did, he started moving in the direction of the diamond. As he started moving in the direction, it started becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. It started to get clearer and clearer and clearer. And he came to the nearest point. It's the mouth of the cave. It's the mouth of the cave. And he ran out of the cave. And Ramatirtha says, first time in his life, he experienced fresh air. First time in his life, he experienced fresh air. He saw the sun, he saw the moon, he saw the stars, he saw everything, the flora, the fauna, and he was like Nataraja, he was dancing in ecstasy. Like Nataraja, he was dancing in ecstasy. That dance of liberation. He was dancing. And then he remembered the group stuck inside the cave. Then he said, oh my God, now my job is to get back and pull them out. So he walked back and went and told the group there is the sun, there is the moon, there is the fresh air. What we are experiencing here is foul air. There is an ethereal air. Come out. Everybody said, you have gone mad. For there is no stars, there is no sun, there is no moon, there is no nothing. But he continued to stay with that group, continued to speak, continued to keep talking to them, in the hope that at least one fellow will wake up. And one fellow woke up and came to this man and said, I am willing to walk with you. I am willing to take the risk and walk with you. He guides him out. And then he says, now it is your turn to go back and bring one more fellow. Thus the Guru Shishya Parampara continues. That's the Guru Shishya Parampara. One person wakes up, he comes back, speaks to the entire humanity, and one will have the courage to pursue that. Ramatirtha says, water comes from the rocks. Beautiful, extraordinary example of Ramatirtha. Water comes from the rocks. You take a piece of rock and squeeze, there is no water. Now, how can you believe that water comes from the rocks? And yet, Ramatirtha says, if you have gone to the mountain peaks, you know, water comes from the rocks. But at least inga konjamaadu or vettavaadu irukanum illaya. You take that's how the intellect, that's how the mind are able to follow. Water comes from the rock, and the rock here is bone dry. See, at least there has to be some some connection. No. The man says, Come with me, I'll take you shoulder to shoulder, he says. Come with me, I'll take you shoulder to shoulder, I'll take you. And I'll show it to you that water comes from the, and I'll show it to you that water comes from the rocks. Are you able to follow? Now, no way the person in the cave can be convinced. If he is convinced without coming out of the cave, he is only imagining. Are you able to follow? The person who didn't make an effort to come out of the cave, still bound inside the cave, says, I can understand what you are saying. That person has no, he doesn't even have the slightest clue. That is why anybody says, correct sir, I have also experienced God sometimes in Vedanta comes and says, it's like the man in the cave who stuck to the chain, not even saying that I can understand what you mean by stars, sir. I can understand what you mean by the sun, the moon. The Guru says you have known nothing. Adhan Kenopanishad part 2. He says you have known nothing. Take the risk and take the plunge. Take the risk and walk with me. Walk with me now with Shraddha. In the walking, there will be a fall, there will be a hurt, there will be a difficult situation, doubts, everything will come. He says, let go of all that. Continue that. That is how you can become the infinite. The finite can never become the infinite. The infinite can see only the infinite. The infinite cannot see finite. The infinite can only see infinite, because whatever it sees, wherever it sees, it will see only itself. That is why the person who has gone to the state of Brahman says, all that is there around is also Brahman. It's not only I am Brahman. Even though you do not know this, you are also Brahman. Only because it is infinite only. Even though you don't know that you are consciousness, the truth is you are consciousness. Just as when a rope is misunderstood to be a snake, even while the boy is experiencing the snake, does the snake really exist? It does not exist. For the snake never had a birth. For the snake never had an existence. But for that boy who's suffering, it is different. So even when he is suffering, imagine that boy has gained the knowledge. He will not say the snake turned into a rope. He will not say that. What he will say? He will not say the finite became infinite. What he will say? The snake disappeared. That which was existing is there now. Yeah. இல்லாதது போச்சு, இருக்கிறது தெரியறது, அவ்வளவுதான். That's all. இல்லாதது is gone. That which is not there is gone. That which is there is cognized. And who cognizes that? Brahman itself cognizes. The Brahman itself cognizes. Therefore, it is the infinite that cognizes the infinite and sees only infinite everywhere. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnameva Pasishyate Brahmarpanam Brahmahavihi Brahmagnav Brahmanahutam Brahmaiva Tena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Samadhina Kshetragyam Chapimam Viddhi Sarva Kshetreshu Bharata. In so many ways, all have described it in the same way. You follow? So the finite dissolves the infinite is cognized. So the moment you cognize the infinite, what you will see? You will only see the infinite. For the person who have realized Brahman, will see only Brahman. He may agree with you, he may temporarily agree to your limited ego. That is why you go to the great masters, you go to the Upanishadic master, you go to any enlightened master, he says, don't worry about purifying the ego, bettering the ego. Get rid of the non-existing ego. Get rid of that which is non-existing. Are you able to follow? That's how it works. Yeah, Bharat. Okay. Yes. Thanks. Yes.
Thanks, sir. Unmute pannar avara.
Okay.
Mute.
Okay. Yeah. Right, Bharat.
Thank you.
Now some more questions. I think நம்ம Zoom class வச்சுக்கலாம் போல இருக்கு நிறைய. ஏன்னா இவ்வளவு questions வந்துட்டே இருக்கு. Real classல கூட everybody will sit like a Buddha and I will be the one constantly talking. Question மேல question வந்துட்டே இருக்கு. Bala, what is moha in the context of Vedanta? What is the exact English equivalent of moha? Is delusion. The nearest English equivalent is delusion. Is moha different from raga dvesha? Moha, the parinama of moha is raga dvesha. The modification of moha is raga dvesha. Modification of moha. It is moha that modifies itself into raga and dvesha. So how is it different? It is the modification. Just as krodha, lobha, mada, matsarya, bhaya is a modification of desire. Parinama of ragadvesha. Moha to ragadvesha. Ragadvesha to krodha, mada, matsarya, bhaya, all that. That's how the parinama, it modifications. If further and further and further, it modifies itself. So what is moha? Moha is the delusion. What is the delusion? The infinite misunderstanding itself to be the finite. That is moha. The infinite misunderstanding itself to be a finite is what moha is all about. In English, it is translated as delusion. It doesn't really, it is something much deeper than that. It is much more deeper than what the English word delusion means. Delusion is a misunderstanding. Delusion means a misunderstanding of the finite, the infinite, misunderstanding itself to be the finite. That is moha. How are the following words related to raga? Obsession, addiction, OCD, compulsive behavior. All these three bala is of stubborn mind. Obsession, addiction, OCD, all is nothing but various expressions of a stubborn mind, a disturbed mind. Obsession means obsession means the mind's craving for it under all circumstances. Obsession is Ravana to Sita. That is an obsession. Addiction. Addiction is the mind's conviction that I have experienced happiness through this in the past, so continue the same thing to get more and more happiness. This is addiction. Addiction is nothing but wanting the past happiness to be repeated again and again and again. That is what addiction is all about. I ate mango. I found happiness. Now I want that happiness again and again and again. And whenever I want that happiness, my mind will start searching for mango. Again, there is a play of senses in it. I'm not going so deep into I'm not going deep into this, these three: obsession, addiction, and the third one is compulsive behavior. Are they all related to the Raga Dvesha? Yes, they are related to Raga Dvesha. Is Maya and Moha the same? Yes. Maya, Moha, all these are used. Maya, Mithya, Moha, all these words are used synonymously. All means the same. For all these words are used synonymously. Maya, Mithya, Moha, Ajnanam, Avidya, all can be used synonymously. All means the same. In different contexts, we use different words. But concept-wise, all are one and the same. Is it okay, Bala? Or do you have something specific? Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
You mentioned about the parinama, right? The parinama or the evolution. I think you mentioned modification.
Yes.
I would say Tamil parinamam is more of an evolution.
Yes. Yes.
Like that way, right? So it evolves from initial moha or maya, all the other words you mentioned.
Yes.
So from that it goes to Raga Dvesha.
Yes.
And from there it evolves to the 6 types you mentioned.
Yes.
Kama,
correct. Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
That becomes the actionable entities.
Yes. Correct. Yes.
So initially the moha and all that are at the state of mind.
Yes.
If you talk about the Pancha Kosha and all, this is more of a Manonmaya Kosha level.
Yes.
From that level, transfers or modifies or evolves into a physical body or which is the Sthula Sarira, right? So it exhibits Krodha and Kama and all that.
All that, yes. Perfect. Correct.
Our Indriyas, our Karmendriya, we act upon it.
Yes. Correct.
That's the evolutionary process, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
if you look at it from the firstmost one, which is the Moha, Maya, and all that.
Yes.
For that, there will be another evolutionary point is the Vasanas, correct?
Yes.
So all the things about obsession, addiction, and the compulsive behavior, everything, are the root cause is will be Vasanas.
Yes, root. Yes, the root. If we start working backwards from obsessive compulsive disorder to raga, root by vasana வந்து நிக்கும் அது.
Okay.
It will end up in vasana. It will end up in vasana.
Okay, thanks. And because of these actionable things done by the physical body, and they ultimately, based on all the koshas, it evolves. Ultimately, that action itself causes more vasanas and goes in a vicious cycle.
Yes, correct. That's a vicious cycle of bondage.
That's a bandha you mentioned.
Yes, that's a bandha. That's how the vasanas drive into the vasanas drive the action, and the very action that I do increases the vasanas.
Okay. Yeah, then the simple question, how to break this is all this addiction, compulsive behavior, all that, right? So probably that I mentioned it many times, but I'm just saying. So coming back to the breaking the bondage is the bandha is the solution.
Yes, the how to break it is through, for a person who is obsessed, addicted, and compulsive behavior and all. Knowledge is not the solution first. Because to them, because their instruments is not in a position to receive knowledge.
Okay.
So they have to be helped out in all the other ways. Get them out of it first, prepare them to receive knowledge, and then help them with knowledge.
Okay.
Straight away, that person cannot be given knowledge because the instruments are not capable of receiving it because they are so the agitation levels are so high that knowledge cannot be received at all.
Okay.
And so whatever whatever help we do in terms of the sciences and whatever we are doing, we have to help them out through that. Slowly, knowledge has to be carefully given in dosages to them. Because knowledge will create more danger to such people.
Okay.
That is why such people should not be given this knowledge first. They should be, they will be given a lot of action, lot of karma yoga will be given to them. They have to be driven into action a lot, quietens the mind to some basic level, and then give them the knowledge.
Okay. So that's a Vedantic way of looking at rehabilitation.
Yes, that's how we do it. That's how we suggest. Seriya?
Thanks. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Just one quick note. I will put it in note. Just an interesting observation. Yesterday's Raman, right? He mentioned the episode mentioned about the Mashana Vairagya.
Yes.
So even he says after all he gets killed, he says, no, I will quit the kingdom and come with you for Vanvas and all that.
Yes.
Rama stops and says, exactly use the word Mashana Vairagya because your brother died.
Yes.
2 days later, you just give it up and then you're fine. Anyway, just want to kind of mention that practical life, I see the Vedantic term being used in. Thank you. I'll see it on.
Thanks. Now, we get back to the text. In about 15 minutes, so we will get back to the text continuing of the personality chart into buddhi. Intellect. Again, he defines the intellect into sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. First, intellect is that which recognizes there are two. As the intellect, pairs of opposites. Intellect is that which recognizes, which realizes that there is the two, and of the two, it has to choose one. This is the function of the intellect. In the case of the all other species, these two don't exist. Therefore, the rudimentary intellect is sufficient for them. In the case of a human being, from as Swamiji keeps saying, from birth to death, cradle to graveyard, the human being is faced with these two. So the function of the intellect is to, the function of the intellect, the role of the intellect is to distinguish the two. This is called Viveka. This is called Viveka. What are the two? Fundamentally, all boils down to the fundamental two, the two pairs. One is Karyam, Akaryam. What should I do? What should I know? What I should not do? The first pair. The second pair is Nityam, Anityam. Are you able to follow? The function of the intellect is to, a human being has these two. He has to choose. What is the choose? What is it that he has to make a choice? The choice is of two. What should be done? What should not be done? At any point of time in life, at every stage in life, we always have this dilemma. Am I to do this? Am I not to do this? Like what he says as Hamlet. To be or not to be. So the first pair, the intellect, is Karyam and Akaryam. The second is Nityam and Anityam. That which is real, that which is unreal. So intellect is that the function of the intellect is to make a person distinguish and rightly understand between these two. And this intellect, he divides it into three: Sattvic intellect, Rajasic intellect, and the Tamasic intellect. Before I quickly talk about the Sattvic, Rajasic, and Tamasic intellect, and I'll take it up again in the next class, today I just want to mention that it is of, the function of the intellect is of Karyam and Akaryam. Second is Nityam, Anityam. Real, unreal. What should I do? What I should do, and what I should not be doing. Because a human being is always faced with these two things, he has to make this, he needs this intellect. If this two pairs is not there, human being doesn't need an intellect at all. Since these two doesn't exist for an animal, the basic intellect is enough for them to continue with life. But in the case of a human being, you find these two existing. What are the two? The two pairs. The two pairs of Karyam, Akaryam. Second one is Nityam and Anityam. Recognizing these two pairs is Viveka. Enquiring into the nature of this is Vichara. So the function of the intellect is to do this Viveka and Vichara. Vichara means inquiry. Viveka means discriminative. So discriminative inquiry is the function of the intellect, and this discriminative inquiry is of three types: Sattvic, Rajasic and Tamasic. Another beautiful description of the interesting facet of a human being, which is the buddhi, the intellect. Sattvic buddhi knows what to do, what not to do. Rajasic intellect is confused about what to do, what not to do. Tamasic intellect, exactly the opposite. It will do what it should not do and avoids that which should be done. Sattvic intellect does karyam and avoids akaryam. Tamasic intellect does akaryam and avoids karyam. Rajasic intellect is confused. ஒரு வாட்டி பார்க்கும்போது இது கரெக்டா இருக்குது. At one time, karyam seems to be the right thing to do. At another point of time, akaryam seems to be the karyam. So this confused intellect is what is known as the Rajasic intellect. I'll explain. I'll give some stories and explanation next week. But today I want to give the definition clear. What is the definition? Intellect is that which distinguishes, discriminates. What does it distinguish? Distinguishes between the opposites, between the two. What are the two? Karyam, akaryam, nityam, anityam. The function of the intellect is to register, recognize that there are these two, and it does vichara, enquiry into the nature of these two. First, இது ரெண்டு இருக்குதுன்னு தெரிஞ்சுக்கணும். அப்புறம் இந்த ரெண்டை பத்தின என்கொயரி பண்ணணும். Sattvic intellect is that which does it rightly. Rajasic intellect is confused. Tamasic intellect உல்டா. இப்போ காரியம் அகாரியம் அப்படின்னா what should be done, what should not be done. What should be done, what should not be done. Who decides that? Two things can decide. One is your raga dvesha, another thing is the shastra. So, if you need to know what is karyam and what is akaryam, what should be done and what should not be done, what is the reference point? Who's the one who teaches you? Not your ragadvesha, not your likes and dislikes, but the shastras. So the Sattvic intellect knows what ought to be, what should be done, what should not be done, under the guidance of the Shastra. Rajasic intellect is confused. What is the confusion? Sometimes it will act according to Ragadvesha, sometimes it will act according to the Shastra, which is right. That confusion always is Rajasic intellect. Are you able to follow? Tamasic intellect, exactly the opposite. What is it? Adharma as dharma. Raga dvesha is right. So, Tamasic intellect understands adharma as dharma. Rajasic intellect is confused between what is dharma and what is adharma. Sattvic intellect knows exactly what is dharma and what is adharma. So, karyam, akaryam is intricately connected to dharma and adharma. So what should be done, what should not be done is in relation to the dharma and adharma. So when Sattvic intellect makes the choice of what ought to be done, not based on ragadvesha, not based on likes and dislikes, but based on what the Shastras have taught. That is Sattvic intellect. Rajasic intellect is the intellect which sometimes acts according to Shastras, sometimes gets carried away by its own likes and dislikes, and it remains confused between the two. This is Rajasic intellect. What is Tamasic intellect? Shastras, higher, adella avanga pesne irupanga. All that is nice to hear, all that is nice to give as a discourse to somebody else, but what you should practice in life. யாருக்காவது லெக்சர் கொடுக்கணும்னா take the Shastras, but what you need to practice in life, you live life according to likes and dislikes. இதுதான் Tamasic intellect. So intellect, we have seen any number of times. Intellect means the discrimination, the distinguishing faculty. It discriminates. What does it discriminate? It discriminates between the two. What is the two? Karyam, akaryam, nityam, anityam. Karyam, akaryam solli kudukirathu Shastram. Nityam, anityam solli kudukirathu Shastram. So what the intellect does, it takes the guidance from that. So Sattvic intellect has this right understanding. Rajasic intellect is confused. Tamasic intellect has a kind of clarity in ulta understanding. That is why I'll conclude with this. Tamasic intellect understands, you can't say understands, Tamasic intellect has completely misunderstood right as, completely misunderstood wrong as right. எதெல்லாம் தப்போ அதெல்லாம் தான் Tamasic intellect will call it as right. It will say indulgence is right, discipline is waste of time. Discipline இருந்தாலும் you are going to die. By being indulgent also you are going to die. Then what is the point of being disciplined? Might as well indulge. It misunderstands wrong to be right and right to be wrong. This is Tamasic intellect. Rajasic intellect is confused. Sometimes it will appear as right, sometimes it will appear as wrong. It is confused as to what is right and what is wrong. Sattvic intellect has the perfect understanding of what is right and what is wrong. This is the intellect. Next week I'll continue with intellect. I still have something more to discuss about this intellect, but I thought I'll just leave you all today with this basic with the basic definition of intellect. Intellect means that distinguishing between the two. And what is the two? The two of karyam, akaryam, nityam, anityam. This karyam and akaryam, who decides that? What decides that? Not your likes and dislikes, but the Shastras. Second pair that the intellect has to distinguish is what is Shashvatam, what is not Shashvatam. What is Nityam, what is Anityam. What is permanent, what is impermanent. ஓகே, இந்த சுகம் கிடைக்கிறது, இதனால சுகம் கிடைக்கும் எனக்கு, ஆனா இந்த சுகம் சாஸ்வதமா இல்லையா, அதுதான் புத்தி. That is Sattvic intellect. Are you able to follow? It will have a sense contact, get some experiences, happiness. The Sattvic intellect comes and asks, is it permanent or impermanent? If it is it will give the right value to it. If it is permanent, it will understand it rightly. Are you able to follow? I'm just using this as an example to explain what is the sattvic intellect, the rajasic intellect, and the tamasic intellect is. With this, we stop here and we continue next Wednesday in the discussion of sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic intellect.